So, good morning, students. Once again, we continue with Chief Seattle's speech. We had left off halfway through the text. So, this is the second video or the second part of the chapter which I have made into a video for you. And on your screen, you can see Chief Seattle once again. Now, this is the most authentic image or real photograph of Chief Seattle, which I found in Wikipedia, and I thought of sharing with you. So this photograph says, you can see it written down below, the only known photograph of Chief Seattle which was taken in the year 1864. So that means this photograph was clicked 10 years after his so-called speech, the speech which we are reading. This speech was given in 1854 and this photograph was taken in 1864. So once again I'll zoom in to show you the real Chief Seattle. It's written on top, Mr. Chief Seattle. So you can see this is the man. He, of course, this is taken when he was very old already. So, and he's not even wearing his traditional, what you can say, red Indian outfit, but he is the real man. He is the actual man, Chief Seattle. So here he is, and he has most probably a hat in his hand and a stick. So anyway, this is the only known photograph of Chief Seattle taken in 1864. Squamish, and Duwamish leader. So as we know that his father and mother were from two different sects of the same tribe, and so he was the leader of both the tribes. So Suquamish and Duwamish leader. So anyway, now we can continue from where we had left off. The next paragraph, if you connect with the previous video, then you'll be able to follow in proper sequence. Now here we see Chief Seattle continues. He says, the ashes of our ancestors are sacred and their final resting place is hallowed ground. So our ancestors, when they have died and we have cremated them or buried them, so ashes, because you are born from the dust, you go back to the dust. That is what Christianity talks about. But Chief Seattle's community probably burnt their dead. And that's why he's talking about ashes. So he says that where our ancestors died, that ground or that piece of land is always very sacred. Hallowed means something very sacred. While you wander away from the tombs of your fathers, seemingly without regret. So this is the basic difference between you people, the whites, and us. We don't leave our native place because our ancestors have died in this land. So this land is auspicious for us, sacred for us. But you people, you have left your ancestral land and you have crossed the Atlantic and you have come to North America and you are now occupying our territory. So you don't have any regret for that. Your religion was written on tablets of stone by the iron finger of an angry God, lest you might forget it. So here the reference is to Moses and the 10 commandments which he received from God, and he was given the 10 commandments inscribed on a stone tablet, and those were the 10 orders of God which Moses then told the people about and made the people follow. So that reference is being made here. He says that your religion was written on tablets of stone by the iron finger of an angry God, lest you might forget it. So your religion is something which you have to be reminded of constantly. So that's the reason your religion is a written religion. Ours is not a written religion. We don't have religious books, and we don't have set rules which have to be reminded to us from time to time. So we don't require all those things. So that is what he tries to say. He tries to compare the religion once again of the whites with their own religion. And he talks about his religion also, and he says that the red man could never remember nor comprehend it. So it's not possible for the red man or the native Indian to remember your religion and the norms and rules of your religion. And we don't even understand it. Comprehend means to understand. Our religion is the traditions of our ancestors. So our religion is something which has come down for generations from our forefathers. So we don't really have to write down things and remember, and we don't really need a preacher to preach always and tell us that you have to do this, you should not do that, this is called sin and that is not sin, so live like this and don't live like that. So you need a priest, you need a church, you need a place where you go and you practice your religion once in a week, every Sunday. But we don't require that, because it's inbuilt, it's within us, it has come down from our forefathers to us. So we don't really have a written religion like yours. The dreams of our old men, given them by the Great Spirit, and the visions of our sachems, and is written in the hearts of our people. So you see, the Great Spirit, we believe in the Great Spirit. So the red Indians' God is the Great Spirit. The whites, they are Christians. So he says that our God is the Great Spirit, and the essence of our religion is given by the Great Spirit to our ancestors, from whom we have inherited the legacy. And that's the reason why we don't require any written piece of scripture. It is written in our hearts, in the hearts of our people. Your dead cease to love you and the homes of their nativity as soon as they pass the portals of the tomb. So when your people die, when the whites die, once somebody dies, he or she ceases to be a member of the community, and is then found only in the form of a dead body in the grave. But for us, it is not like that, because we believe in the presence of the soul. So that is the difference. Your dead are the ones who have died and gone forever, but our dead do not leave us. They may not have their bodily existence, but the spirits are always with us. They wander far off beyond the stars, are soon forgotten. So your dead, those from your community who die, people who die among you, you forget about them. They wander off far off into the stars and are soon forgotten and never return. But our dead, our culture is such that since time immemorial, any native Indian who has died, his spirit is believed to be living with us even to this day. So that is what we believe. So our beliefs are different. Our dead never forget the beautiful world that gave them being. They still love its winding rivers, its great mountains, and its sequestered vales. And they ever yearn in tenderest affection over the lonely hearted living, and often return to visit and comfort them. So our dead, the spirits of our dead people, never leave us. They are always around us, protecting us, guiding us, and whenever we are in trouble, they give their presence and they encourage us. We feel their presence. They are around us. So we always get the support and we always get the comfort of the spirits provided by the spirits of our dead. So that is the difference. Day and night cannot dwell together. So just as day and night cannot live together, so also the whites and the red Indians cannot live together. It's not possible. We are so different as a race. You are so different from us. Your religion is so different from us. Your culture is so different from us. Your thoughts, your feelings, your habits are so different from us. So we are like day and night. And so just as day and night cannot live together, so also we cannot live together. That's the reason why you are now more in number and we are almost finished. And we are going to be completely finished. The red man has ever fled the approach of the white man, and as the changing mists on the mountainside flee before the blazing morning sun. So the red man has always tried to run away from the approaching white man, just as the mist in the mountain disappears when the morning sun, bright morning sun comes out. So also we are like the mist and you are like the morning sun. You are very bright, you are dazzling, you are very powerful, and we are like the mist which disappears when the sun comes out. However, your proposition seems a just one, and I think that my folks will accept it and will retire to the reservation you offer them. So in North America, both in Canada and in the United States, even today if you visit, you will find Indian reservations. What are these reservations? These are actually villages specially built by the governments of both the countries, Canada and USA, where the Native American Indians or the Red Indians, their ancestors, successors or their children and their children, few generations have gone by already, and these Red Indians can be found living in those reservations. Those are meant specially, built specially for them, and these Native American Indians, even to this day, you can find them living there, but they don't really follow the culture of their ancestors anymore. They are modern people, just like any other American. Even these Red Indians live a very modernized life, but the only plus point in their livelihood is that they don't have to do much work. The government provides them with money and settlement, so they have become a handful of them can actually be found, and they have actually become a very lazy lot. So it's not their fault. You see, their this protection rights or social justice, the things that were promised to Chief Seattle and his people in 1854, is something which now, even now, can be seen if you go either to Canada or to United States of America. There are certain areas where these villages are have been built by the governments, and here the native Red Indians still live. And when they are basically maintained by the governments of both the countries, because when tourists go to visit their townships or villages, these native Indians dress up in their traditional attire and they perform before them to entertain them. So that is it assists in tourism business nowadays, nothing else. So anyway, what Chief Seattle goes on to say is that I and my people will accept your proposal and we will retire to the reservation. Reservation means that village, reserved village only for Red Indians to live in. So the reservation you offer them, and we will dwell apart in peace. And in this way, we will live separately from you and peacefully with you. That is, we will no longer have fights with you, and we will live in the restricted villages where we are supposed to be living from here on, or that is hereafter. So we will go there and we will start living there, and we are already all set for that. For the words of the great white chief seem to be the voice of nature speaking to my people out of the thick darkness. So the voice of the great white chief, referring to the President of the United States, who has sent the message which we have discussed in the previous video, that they should hand over their land to the whites, and in return the whites will give them protection. So he says that it's like nature's voice speaking to us. His message is like nature's voice to us. And my people out of the thick darkness that is fast gathering around them like a dense fog floating inward from a midnight sea. So a lot of poetic comparison here being made. Actually, Chief Seattle himself may not have spoken like this. It was only afterwards, when his speech was translated, that these special poetic touches were added to it. So anyway, the basic thing that he means to say here is that we can feel that our days are numbered, and the darkness of doom is finally closing in upon us. So we would like to take the offer that you are giving, and we will follow your advice. It matters but little where we pass the remainder of our days. It really does not matter much now. Now that we have lost everything, our entire land is now yours. So it really doesn't matter where we spend our last few days. They are not many. Meaning to say, our last few days are not many. We may not have very many days more to continue. We are a race who will soon become extinct. Our days are numbered. The Indian's night promises to be dark. So the night which is approaching us, that is the final destiny, the doom which is approaching us, it promises to be very, very dark, which means there is no light at the end of a dark tunnel for us anymore. we are destined to be finished forever. No bright star hovers about the horizon. Yes, like I said, there is no bright light at the end of the tunnel. So also there is no bright star in that night which is approaching upon us, which will guide us. No bright star. Sad voiced winds moan in the distance as if nature is crying for us. The movement of the wind causes a moaning sound. So, once again, very poetically conveyed here. Sad voiced winds moan in the distance. Some grim nemesis is destiny, nothing else but destiny. Nemesis is the other name of destiny. Some grim means dismal, something which is bad, negative. Dismal destiny or bad destiny is waiting for us, waiting for our race, is on the red man's trail. It is on the same pathway where we are walking. And whenever he goes, or rather wherever he goes, he will still hear the sure approaching footsteps of the fell destroyer and prepare to meet his doom, as does the wounded doe. Doe means a female deer. So just as an injured deer tries to run away from the hunter, but it cannot run very fast, and then along the trail behind, just behind it, behind it, the doe can hear the approach of the hunter. So also we are able to feel the approach of impending doom upon us. A few more, then he says, a few more moons, a few more winters, and not one of all the mighty hosts that once filled this broad land, or that now roam in fragmentary bands through these vast solitudes, will remain to weep over the tombs of a people once as powerful, as hopeful as your own. Just a few more moons. Well, the native Red Indians, they actually kept pace of time, or kept track of time, or the changing months and weeks and years and days by means of counting the number of suns and number of moons. So how many moons and how many suns have gone by. So that way. So counting the number of times the moon made its appearance would give them a count of how many days have gone by. So their calendar was nature. See, everything is so nature oriented with these Red Indians. They are totally different from the whites. So few more winters. We may not last very long. Just a few more winters means few more years. And not one of all the mighty hosts that once filled this broad land. None of us will remain. Not even a single one of us. All our past great ancestors have died, and even we are on the verge of being finished. So there will be no one to weep over the tombs of the dead. When our last few Indians will die, there will be no one left to cry over their graves. That's what is going to happen. We are going to become extinct. Well, Chief Seattle is not correct exactly, because even today, as I told you, if you go to North America, if you go to Canada or USA, you can visit the Red Indian reservations and you can meet the descendants of Chief Seattle. In fact, if you visit Wikipedia, you can see another photograph, that of Chief Seattle's daughter. And then if you look for the ancestry and the family tree, you can still find someone maybe living either in Canada or in the United States in one of those Indian reservations who is a blood relation of Chief Seattle. Anyways, so he says that there will be no one to weep over the tombs of our people who were once so powerful and hopeful, just as you are now. But why should we repine? Why should I murmur at the fate of my people? Why should I repent? Why should I regret, feel sorry? Why should I feel sad about the fate of my people, what they are facing now? Tribes are made up of individuals and are no better than they. Men come and go like the waves of the sea. He says that tribes have come and tribes have gone. Human beings have lived on the surface of the earth ever since time immemorial. Many great tribes have lived here on earth who do not exist anymore. So you see, it's all, we are all time bound. We are all time bound. So if you watch the Mahabharata, you will see that in the opening scene of that TV series, it always begins with Main Samay Hoon. So with time, everything changes. Nobody is permanent. Nobody is forever. So today, our days are coming to an end, and your glorious days have begun. So white men, now it's your turn to take over. Our days are over. Why should I murmur at the fate of my people? Why should I complain? To murmur means to complain about the destiny of my people. Tribes are made up of individuals and are no better than they. Men come and go like the waves of the sea. A tear, a Tamanamus, a dirge, and they are gone from our longing eyes forever. So, if we look at history, we will find the great Roman Empire, or the ancient Greek civilization, or the Incas. If we go further back, the Incas of South America, or if we look at Indian history, we'll find the great Mughals who have ruled over us. See, golden era, there is a golden era for each civilization. Mohenjo-daro and Harappa. Today when we dig up the remains of that ancient civilization, we realize how advanced and well planned they were. So he says that it's all a matter of time. And time is ever passing, and time is never ending. And time takes into its grasp every living creature on earth, including the earth itself. So animals, look at the animals. Dinosaurs are now extinct. We only find fossils and bones. Why? Because evolution has taken place. Time has taken its toll on those animals and have given rise to different species of animals. So old species gradually become extinct and new species replace them. Same with human beings. Same with civilizations. So that is what he's talking about here. Even the white man, you can look up the meanings if you have any doubt. In the workbook itself, you will find the meanings explained in the notes section. Whenever we read the text, there should be a workbook open. There should be the workbook open beside you, and you can quickly have a glance at the meanings. Even the white man, whose God walked and talked with him. According to Chief Seattle, who was the white man's God who walked and talked with white man? Obviously Jesus Christ. He's talking about Jesus Christ. As friend to friend, Jesus was just like any ordinary common person. There was nothing special in his external appearance which could separate him from the rest of the people who were always with him. So, your God walked with you, talked with you, and was friendly with you, is not exempt from the common destiny. So even he was not exempted from the common fate of all human beings. He too had to die and leave forever. So we may be brothers after all. We shall see. Yeah, in that sense, if in all other aspects we are so different, at least in one aspect, I can say we are similar. We are brothers. Because our destinies are the same. Today we are finishing off. Tomorrow it will be your turn. No joke. That's what he's pointing at. So then he says, we will ponder your proposition, and when we have decided, we will tell you. So we'll think about the proposal which you have given, and after thinking about it, we'll decide, and then we'll let you know what we decide. But should we accept it? I here and now make this the first condition. But then, if we accept your proposal, then at this very point of time, here itself, I would like to give you certain conditions with regard to our acceptance of your proposal. So he says that we will not be denied the privilege without molestation of visiting at will the graves of our ancestors and friends. So first and foremost, our condition is that we should never be denied the privilege of visiting the graves of our forefathers, our friends. We should not be forced to stay away from the graves of our forefathers and friends. So molestation means forcefully pushing us away from the scope of visiting the graves. So we should not be restricted. In other words, we should not be restricted by the whites from visiting the graves of our ancestors and also our friends. Every part of this country is sacred to my people. That's because, please remember that every part of this country, which is made up of such a huge landmass, it's very, very auspicious to all the native Red Indians. Every hillside, every valley, every plain and groove has been hallowed, has been made sacred or auspicious by some fond memory or some sad experience of my tribe. So there are so many memories associated with this land, so many good memories and bad memories, sometimes sad memories. So many things have happened for generations on this land. There are so many different areas where so many fond memories and sad experiences can be related to. So for us, it is a very sacred piece of land. Even the rocks that seem to lie dumb as they swelter in the sun. So even the rocks which you see lying in the sun and burning in the heat of the sun, they are also important for us. Along the silent seashore, you see these rocks lying along the silent seashore in solemn grandeur. They have a grandeur, or they have a class of their own, in solemn grandeur, thrill with memories of past events. So these rocks are actually silent witnesses of past events. So even the rocks are important for us. Memories of past events connected with the fate of my people. So everything here, the rocks, the land itself, everything is full of memories for us, for us, meaning to say for the Red Indian people. And the very dust under your feet responds more lovingly to our footsteps than to yours. And the dust on which you walk, the dust which lies under your feet, well, the native Red Indians, for them this dust is very dear, because when we walk on the dust, it responds back with a kind of softness or gentleness or tenderness, because this land originally belongs to us and loves us. It does not love you. So when you walk on the dust does not treat you the same way as it does to us. The reason is simple, because it is the ashes of our ancestors, and our bare feet are conscious of the sympathetic touch, because this dust is made from the ashes of our ancestors. We have cremated them, and their ashes have turned into the dust. So when we walk on the dust, we are actually being comforted by, gently touched by, sympathetically touched by our ancestors. That's what we believe. For the soil is rich with the life of our kindred. Well, this soil is rich with the life of those who were related to us. The noble braves and fond mothers and glad-hearted maidens and the little children who lived and rejoiced here, and whose very names are now forgotten, still love these solitudes, and their deep fastness at eventide grow shadowy with the presence of dusky spirits. So you see, our past generations who have lived and died, whose names have already been forgotten now, they still happen to live even today, even when the dusk grows upon us and we are about to see the end of our race. They still live here. They are always, as I told you earlier, that Chief Seattle says that the spirits of their dead, the Red Indians who have died in the past, they live on, and they are always like guardian angels and supporting and protecting the Native American Indians or the Red Indians. And when the last red man shall have perished from the earth, and his memory among white men shall have become a myth, these shores shall swarm with the invisible dead of my tribe. And when your children's children, so when the last red Indian man dies, when we become totally extinct, when the last of our last man of our tribe dies, and when the whites will be roaming upon the surface of this land, your children or their children's children will be roaming upon this piece of land and will be thinking themselves alone in the field, the store, the shop, upon the highway, or in the silence of the woods. They will actually not be alone. Why? Because even if we die and cease to have bodily existence, our spirits will always be haunting you. We will always be around. This land will be ours, as now as forever. In all the earth, there is no place dedicated to solitude. At night, when the streets of your cities and villages shall be silent and you think them deserted, they will actually be crowded. Throng means crowd. With the returning hosts. Who are the hosts? You people are guests. We belong to this land. It is our land. We belong to this land. But you are outsiders. So the hosts will return. The same hosts, the same native Indians, but this time not with bodily existence, but in the form of spirits. The hosts will return, those hosts who once filled and still love this beautiful land. The white man will never be alone. So, even if you take over our territory, you will never be alone. We will always be around you. Let him be just and deal kindly with my people. Talking about the great white chief, the President of the United States of America. So, when I finish my speech, I would just like to say this at the end, that let the white chief be just and deal kindly with my people, for the dead are not altogether powerless, because those who die, they don't become powerless completely. Even the dead have their power. So I just want to give this message to the white chief, that he should treat us kindly, so that even if we are dead and gone, we should remember that kindness and should allow you to live on happily in this land which originally belonged to us. So this is the conclusion of the original Seattle Sunday Star article, and it was actually translated by Sir Henry Smith. Other speakers followed, but I took no notes. Governor Stevens' reply was brief. He merely promised to meet them, General Council, blah blah blah. So all this comes in, and notes. Now here, this is something which could be of some interest for you. The Indians in early times. Now in the first video I was talking about King George, and I had told you that King George apparently refers to George Washington, though George Washington was not the President of the United States of America in 1854, but the Red Indian chief believed that he was still the president. George Washington was the first president of the United States of America long before 1854. So anyway, the Indians in early times thought that Washington was still alive. They knew the name to be that of a president, and when they heard of the president at Washington, because Washington DC, District of Columbia, the capital of the United States of America, is named after George Washington. So when the great white chief sends his message from Washington DC, they thought that President Washington is still there. They mistook the name of the city for the name of the reigning chief. Now, president is a term which the whites use, but for the red Indians, the one who leads the race is called the chief. So they think of him as present and still alive. They thought too that King George was still England's monarch, because the Hudson Bay traders called themselves King George's men. This innocent deception, the company was shrewd enough not to explain away, for the Indians had more respect for them than they would have had they known England was ruled by a woman. Who was ruling England? Queen Victoria. So that's the reason why they still maintained with the Indians, the whites. They did not let the red Indians know that England's monarch was Queen Victoria and not King George. So that's it for the day, and we have come to the end of the text of Chief Seattle's speech. I have tried to explain the entire speech in a simplified form, and I hope you have been able to understand. And in case if you have any doubt with regard to any area, any particular area, you can always play this video again and go through that portion where I have explained it, so that you have no confusion with the text. Now what remains now in hand is to do the question answers. You must complete the question answers from the workbook in your English literature homework copies. So thank you very much. Have a nice day.